Hi, good morning, class. So today what we're going to be working on is trying to start the research portion of your endangered species project. So this is part 2. And just as a reminder, that looks like the following. And so when you actually get into the document, you guys are going to be filling in a portion of this. That's all part 2 of your research worksheet. And I know it says on here the particular due date, but the Canvas assignment has an adaptation to that, so it's actually going to be pushed back a day. But you're going to be working on this in class throughout the day. And so as you are starting through it, remember that you need to be finding all this following information. This is just kind of a quick summary page of everything that you're trying to get to. But now let's actually get down to the nitty-gritty details. So you have 4 sources that you need to have found and submitted on Canvas before you can actually move on to this portion. And so hopefully you found your IUCN source, you found your your journal source, which is number 2. You found your, let me go to this, you found your 4 sources here. All right, so you found your IUCN, your scientific journal, your internet source, and also your optional, this is one you can choose, either a book, an internet source, it could be a magazine article, anything that you would like to include as your 4th source. So you need to have submitted this to the Canvas assignment before you can move on to this step here. So that was the last class assignment. And so now you're working on the Endangered Species Project, and you're trying to get the actual information for filling this in. And so when you are looking at this, you need to start with writing down your animal's common name, which you should already have written on the front page, and the scientific name here. And with a lot of the searches that you guys have been doing, you might have recognized that the scientific name is really helpful for finding information about your species. Well, hopefully you are starting to get familiar with your scientific name, and you're going to start using that to gain as much information about this species as you can. So start off first with getting your species identification and classification down. And actually a good source for getting this, if you haven't found one already, actually is Wikipedia. They have a pretty up-to-date taxonomic tree for each of these different species. So this is actually a good place to start for this. Now let's look down on the endangered species, the year on the endangered species list. So guys always get hung up on some of these details, but let me go ahead and show you a couple places to find this. So once again, we go back to our friendly place on the IUCN website, and if we search for our friend the bog turtle, and we pull up its page, all right, what we're going to be doing, move my screen, is we're going to be going down to where it says taxonomy. And when you look at taxonomy, it's going to be talking all about all the different scientific classification information. And then you scroll down a little bit more to where it says the assessment information. So when you're trying to figure out what is the year that it was placed on the endangered species list, you're going to notice here under the assessment information that it's listed as critically endangered, this particular species, and it was first assessed in 2010. They published this thing in 2011. So for this particular species, if I click under assessment information in detail, here were all the times that it was looked at and analyzed. And so in other words, since 1982, they've been looking at this species and wondering if it's under threat, but it wasn't until 2010 in this case that the most recent assessment was done. So the actual year that it was put on the endangered species list, in this case, it looks like 1996 was when it was actually listed as endangered. So we could put that number down for the year. But once again, there's kind of some different classifications that we don't use anymore. The idea of rare. So if you wanted to put 1988 down, you can. You could say 1988 rare for, if you were doing this species. But once again, we're just trying to figure out how long has this species been on the radar of the community that looks at this. So people who are looking at the conservation of these species. Okay, next one, current population size. You keep scrolling down, or you can even click ahead to the population. And sometimes the IUCN has this information, sometimes it doesn't. And so sometimes they don't know if it's going up or down, or if there's a certain trend. But they might have an estimate on the population over here. So once again, you're going to want to read this in a little bit of detail and figure out if there's a specific number, or maybe they have a couple estimates. But whatever it is, try and put that down here. If there's no population size that they don't know, then just put that down as well. Here you're going to list your IUCN classification status. That's the same thing that you found on the front. So which one of these classifications is it? EW, CR, EN, BU, NT. So put that down. Now, for the threats that are endangering your species, this is one, for most of you guys, I kind of redid this chart midway through the start of this project, and so most of you guys should have this updated one by now. But if you don't, it's virtually the same thing. It's just a checkbox, or you can put an X in here if your species has this. So you can go down to threats, and you're going to look and see, okay, does my species have this particular threat? And so commercial development or agriculture or things like that, those are all going to be examples of, in this case, habitat destruction. All right, and transportation services and service corridors, railroads and roads. Once again, that's another example of habitat destruction, because there's this issue with them not having enough space to move around. Hunting and trapping, that's most likely going to be overhunting. The invasive species, you would click over here. Climate change, you would click up here. All right, or put a check mark up here. And so whatever are listed here, I know sometimes the wording is a little bit confusing, but try to read the additional details here, or you can even click on this, and this gives you a little bit more information. So once again, as you're filling that in, now you're going to go into a little bit more detail about what your threats are. And the threats can be all sorts of different things, but once again, you have, if you've done your research on the front end correctly, then you should have a good amount of information over here that explains what's going on with your species. And so if you listed, let's say, if you had an X here, an X here, an X here, and then an X here, all right, then that would mean you would need 3 different sentences down here. So for every threat that you listed above, you need to explain in at least one sentence how that threatens your species. So I would need a sentence or more on habitat destruction, on invasive species, and climate change. Okay? So once again, you'd look in here and you'd say, okay, well, within protected wetland habitat, they have this bog turtle species does a little bit better because there's fewer invasive species, or invasive species in this case can reduce the number of bog turtles that are there. All right, you can talk about how roads and increased eating of eggs, all right, is one of so the more roads that there are, the more threat there is to both the eggs and also to the turtles. So that's kind of a habitat destruction as well as an invasive species thing. So once again, you're just trying to explain some of the causes for threats for your species. Then you're going to go to what's being done to save it. So this could be going down to conservation actions. And in this case, these are some of the things that they're doing. And once again, they might seem kind of confusing when you first read this. This is a little bit more for the person who's looking at this on a daily basis for their job. But read down here. All right, and so you can look at what sort of measures are being done. So safeguard remaining habitat from destruction, from degradation and pollution. All right, they would like to have a genetic study done, and then other details of trying to minimize things like habitat fragmentation or climate change impacts or disease. So once again, there are groups that are trying to do that. And then you go down to what's the argument or persuasive statement to convince the audience to take action. Go ahead and circle this one, and we're going to come back to that one in class. What can the average person do to help? Also circle this one. We'll come back to that one. Okay, so some of this stuff, you go to habitat and range. All right, you can go back up to habitat an ecology or geographic range. For the habitat, this does a decent job of describing it, but sometimes there's other websites too that do a good job. So in this case, you have it describes it as marsh and swamp habitat from large bodies of water. And so once again, you're just trying to fill in what is the type of habitat that it lives in. And so that's actually going to be a little bit more down here. What type of habitat does your species live? And make sure you're descriptive. In terms of what country or counties or anything that it lives in, you can get some of that information in the geographic range. All right, so if it's found in the United States, they might list specific states that they're found in, and you can obviously go into detail about that. Maybe it's found just in the southern United States. Maybe it's found only in one small area in one state, but just be specific. Lifespan, sometimes this information is in this chart. Sometimes you have to find it in other places, but don't be afraid. If you don't find it here, that's why you have 3 other sources. When you get down here, reproduction, same sort of thing, food, and interesting facts, that's kind of where your other sources are going to come in. There is some of this information in here. It's just not as necessary for this website. This is focused a lot on their conservation. So as you go from here and you get to these other areas, that's where you might go into, say, a alternative source. So you have bog turtle, and you guys have already done your source searching. And so hopefully you have those other sources that are readily available. And so I might go to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife page on this, or actually another really good one that I just saw was the source right here on Animal Diversity Web. And a lot of times Animal Diversity Web has a lot of good stuff like this. So it might have reproduction on the species, and it talks a little bit about what reproduction is like there. It also has the lifespan, and it has other details like what does it eat. So once again, Animal Diversity Web has a lot of good information if you happen to have your species on here. So once again, you're filling in the details on this, just very basically what this information is like, and then you get to the interesting facts page, and you can include that. Okay. Good luck on this today, guys, and anything you don't get done today, you don't have to work on this portion of it over the weekend. We're going to have some more class time on it on the next class. Okay, good luck.